Not only have we tapped into a source of unlimited free energy, but we can also make oxygen from this system as well. So welcome back, my fellow duplicants. Today we're going to be adding electrolyzers here to the sour gas boiler. Because if you remember back to an earlier episode where we did all of the calculations for the system back here, we noticed that we were going to get a net gain of water. Now, if we take a look at our flowchart again, remember that water's primary objective here is to fuel the oil well so that we get more crude oil to feed the system. That's its number one goal. However, we've done a couple things to increase the efficiency inside our base, and that is increasing the temperature here so that it goes up over 100 degrees Celsius, turns into steam, and then we run it through a steam turbine so that we get a little bit of the energy back out of that, and also we don't have to use the water sieve. Okay, well, I keep getting questions about the water sieve here, so just to make things clear, you don't have to go around the water sieve if you have clean water. It will not use up sand. It will only use sand if the water that goes through the sieve is polluted. So you can pipe it directly to the inlet and to the outlet and run both liquids through it. So just to say that again, so it's nice and clear, only the polluted water will consume sand or filtration medium when it runs through the sieve. That's how it works. Also, equally important, the water that comes out of the sieve is always going to be 40 degrees Celsius. In the current build of the game, and for the last many builds of the game, that's the way it's been. And you can use that to your advantage in many, many different ways, like a heat flusher system like I designed right up here. The key is that we have extra water. Matter of fact, you can see this kind of spaghetti loop here. Sorry for the mess. But essentially what I have going on here is the water that is flowing in right up here is both a little bit of polluted and a little bit of clean water. Kind of depends on how hot this stuff is up here. Ideally, you'd want it to be clean, but it doesn't always happen that way. So I have a little bit of a mix going on through this. Anyhow, that runs through the sieve right now, and then all I do is I run the outlet pipe from the sieve over a liquid reservoir. So it's a lot easier if we just don't even look at the pipes. All I'm doing is running it to a liquid reservoir to begin with, just so I can handle the overflow. That goes from there to the water sieve, and from the water sieve I go to a liquid reservoir. And this liquid reservoir holds clean water, which goes straight down here to the oil well. It gives me a little bit of a buffer so that the oil well always has a nice constant supply. Once this thing fills up, the water will pass right past the inlet here, which is this port right there, and will continue on down the pipe. This is how pipes work, essentially, in that they always prefer to go through the inlet if it's available. And if it's not available, they skip past it. So that's what I did here with this tank. So we skip right past the tank once it's full, and then that heads on over here to my electrolyzer system. Now, self-powering electrolyzers is something I've covered several times here on this channel, maybe even more than this sour gas boiler at this point. But the main idea here is that the electrolyzer puts out both hydrogen and oxygen, and the main idea is that you have to filter that so that the hydrogen obviously just goes to the hydrogen generator and the oxygen just goes out into your base or wherever you need it. All right, let me run you through just setting this thing up right here, because this is a slightly different design than I've used in the past, mostly because we don't have to worry about the extra hydrogen getting deleted. That used to be a problem, but now we've got something that's pretty simple. It's just an electrolyzer right in the middle with a pump on top and bottom. So your hydrogen's obviously the lighter gas, so this is probably where you're going to filter out your hydrogen up there, with oxygen just flowing out the bottom. So the way I have these gas pumps plumbed is I just have a bridge, and then this is connected from there to there and from there to there. That's where the pipes are running through. And then once we get out here, which I'm just going to go ahead and use a different pipe, we're just going to use this gas pipe element sensor right there in order to detect what is in that pipe. So for this method here, I'm using the gas pipe element sensor in order to detect the hydrogen to filter it out. I did a full tutorial on different methods of how we can filter out gas, and you can find that linked up there on the little card if you're curious. But for this one, we're just going to use the gas pipe element sensor because I think it's the easiest one to set up. So if either of these detect hydrogen, then we're going to kick it out. This one down here is probably never going to detect it, but that's just for safety, really. Or maybe peace of mind is a good way of putting that. So there we have it. We're just going to run that pipe up there, and then there we go. Now, it'd probably be a good idea if we wanted to put a little bit of a gas tank up there in order to fill that with hydrogen. What we're going to do today is we're just going to burn this gas off for the sake of energy. So it's probably not needed at all. All right, so that is going to handle all of our hydrogen. But if we detect oxygen, then oxygen is just going to continue to flow right on through. Now this oxygen would then run to wherever you'd need it in the base, but the main thing here is that you don't want it to back up. If you have some sort of source where the oxygen backs up, then this thing can pause, and could potentially kick out the wrong type of gas, damaging your hydrogen generator. Not that that's the end of the world. It's pretty easy to build a hydrogen generator. You can make it out of just about any metal, so it's not that big of a deal. So in that case, I'm just going to use a high pressure gas vent because it's kind of hard to back those up. And there we have it. So we'll get a little bit of oxygen up here and then a whole lot of oxygen down here. Now, one thing that I think is always really important when dealing with a gas shutoff valve and using the gas pipe element sensors here is that you always need to have power for the gas shutoff valves, and they don't use much power at all. A great way to handle this is using a power transformer and then a little bit of a battery right there. So when we connect this, just like that, all of the stuff on the bottom, on the far side of this transformer is just going to be supplied by the capacity of this battery plus the small capacity you have inside of the power transformer here. That way, these things, no matter what's happening with all the power down here, as this thing's turning on and off and whatnot, this will stay powered up. So because of that, it will always be able to redirect the gas out. Now we still need to provide power to all of this stuff down here in order to run, and then you can see that's fairly demanding. We got 1,200 watts potentially, or roughly. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug in a battery right there. It may be best to have a couple batteries actually. Now, one thing I like to do here in this specific arrangement of having pumps on top and bottom of an electrolyzer is to hook it into something like an Atmos sensor and set that to like 300 grams. The reason that you want to do that is because you don't necessarily want hydrogen to be pulled out of the bottom here, and you don't want these things running when it's near a vacuum. Now, one thing I like to do here is just use an Atmos sensor connected to these gas pumps. And the reason I do that is just to kind of keep this from running in a vacuum. So if it's above 300 grams, then it'll run. And if it goes below that, then they turn off. Now you can kind of probably do some more fancy stuff inside of here if you really want to, but I think that's just a way to keep it nice and efficient. Now we need a little bit of startup juice, so I'm gonna go ahead and flip this switch on here that connects this wire. There we go, now we got a lot of power. We can just flick that off. There we go. So now that this is disconnected. So the system over here on the left is all on its own. Okay, so now I have a self-powering electrolyzer system down here. So as the water moves in, it then gets processed into oxygen and hydrogen, and that hydrogen is recaptured in the generator and the power is stored in the battery. And the oxygen is now being pumped out into the base. So what we'll see in the reports here is that we are generating a little bit of oxygen and we're generating some extra power from that hydrogen generator as well. Okay, so now that I have all of this set up, what I can see here is that the extra water that isn't being run into the oil well does pass through here. You should see that sometimes, not all the time. Kind of depends on, you know, where the steam turbines are at, because you can see right now they're recirculating. So I'm not going to get a lot of water out of this. This is one of those things that's going to do this number over time. But at the same time, I'm still getting a little bit of polluted water now that we've cooled down via this guy up there. Like, it's on the back end of everything else that's kind of doing this number. So it's crazy. Okay, so after letting this run a little bit, I decided to change up the battery situation. 20 kilojoules of capacity up there was just not enough to survive kind of the low cycles. So I wanted to increase the capacity so I could store more during a high cycle and survive during the low cycle. So I added 3 jumbo batteries here on the backside of the large power transformer like I was talking about. So the power grid just kind of looks like this. This powers all of that. And that right there just powers this guy right there. I also set this back to 300. I've tried the other numbers. I don't know, 300 seemed to work. One last trick that I think is kind of important here is you don't want to have a long run from where your pumps are to where your actual generator is. If you have a really, really long run, then you can end up drawing the power down before it gets to the generator, so it doesn't kick back up fast enough, and you end up with a system that just doesn't really want to become stable. So make sure that the length of your pipe from here to your generator is relatively short. All right, so I let this thing run here for several cycles. Let's go ahead and try to see some results here. Now, I did attempt to do the calculations in the background to try to predict these numbers, but they were not accurate. And unfortunately, I lost that segment of recording because the thunderstorm ran through and I don't have a battery backup, so I lost power in the video as well. Matter of fact, that's the second video I've lost in the last 24 hours. So I guess I get to go buy a battery backup. Good time to plug that I have an Amazon store page down there in the description below. Help. Anyhow, moving back into this, you can see that the numbers we had last time right here was 10,969 kilojoules, and since I've let this thing run here for several cycles now, we did move up to 11,139, so we're not gaining a lot of power from this thing. The real thing that we're looking for, though, is the amount of free oxygen that we can get out of this current amount of power that we're generating. The more power you generate, the more water you're going to generate, and therefore the more oxygen you will then produce. But let's take a look at how much oxygen we got here. So if I set this to oxygen, it doesn't work. I don't have the option. But on the reports here, if we dig into them and we really try to find them, we will see over here in the oxygen tab, which if I take that and I put that back here, no such luck. All right, plan C. Okay, so these are my oxygen numbers right there. We're just gonna go ahead and paste that over here, and there we have it. That's how much oxygen was generated right there. We'll get rid of used, we don't need that. So this is the oxygen over time right there. You can see it like I was mentioning, it is not very stable. It kind of goes up and down depending on the cycle. What I'd like to compare that to is just how much power was generated via hydrogen, which I should be able to do if I drag in this file right here. Okay, so this is the breakdown of power. So much data, look at that. Hydrogen generator looking for you. There you are. So now if I paste this over here and we paste just the values, yes, we should see that the power mirrors the amount of oxygen we've generated as well. All right, so for this system back here, we were able to generate an average of 258 kilograms of oxygen a day. And that's enough for over 4 duplicants to breathe easy. As far as the amount of power that we were able to retrieve from that, we were getting an average of 177 kilojoules. So not a huge amount of power, but that oxygen could definitely be quite useful. One other thing that might be useful here is the fact that that water that comes out of this sieve here, you know, it is 40 degrees Celsius. And we got an opportunity right here where things go from 160 all the way down to negative 160, right in that area. There's some potential cooling that we could still get out of that water before we then take it and convert it into oxygen. Matter of fact, you guys have mentioned a couple of good ones too. Talking about maybe using this carbon dioxide. It's got a temperature to it. Maybe that could be useful. That sounds like more ideas for some future videos. At any rate, that's all I got time for today. If this looks like the channel for you, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. Stay awesome, guys. Peace. Brothgar.